Right to be Read podcast, episode number 18. Interview with best-selling author Arvind Devalia.
You are listening to the Right to be Read podcast, and this is your host, Ani Alexander.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Right to be Read podcast. Today I'm talking to Arvind Devalia. He is a best-selling author, book marketing expert, coach, and inspirational speaker. Hello, Arvind.
Hi, how are you doing?
Fine, thanks. Welcome to the Right to be Read podcast. I'm really excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I mean, we go back a few years now. We met online. We never met in person, but this is really good to talk to you finally over the phone, and thank you for inviting me for this little interview.
Thank you very much for accepting my invitation. So today, as you already know, this podcast is for writers mainly, and we're trying to encourage and inspire them to go ahead and write their stories and share them with the world. So telling that, I would like to go back and see how you started writing and how did you become an author?
Okay, seems like I've been writing most of my life actually. Even when I was at school, my English language teacher, every time he gave us an essay, I'll end up giving about 20 pages of A4 rather than 2 or 3 pages, which is what he wanted. So he said to me, this is really, really good stuff. And he said, one day maybe you should consider being a writer. But in the meantime, can you please write shorter essays for me? This is far too long. And almost 30 years later, I did write my first few books, and I wish I could somehow get hold of him and track him down. Maybe I will. Maybe through social media I should be able to track him down and send him a copy of one of my books and prove to him that I finally did what he said I should have done. And what happened when I first got into coaching 11 years back, one of the things I do talk about in all my books and on my blogs is about the value of doing things for other people and how much you get back by doing things for other people. And so going back 10 years, I did something for Red Nose Comic Relief at my local cafe in St. John's Wood, central London. And to get publicity for my fundraising, I asked the local paper to cover the story. So at that time, coaching was still quite new, and the journalist I spoke to had never heard of coaching. So I said, look, the best thing is, why don't I give you a coaching session? You come to my place, and we'll go from there. So he really enjoyed my coaching session. So he said, look, I will feature you, but we need a photo of you. So I went off and got myself a red wig, and the photographer came the same afternoon, and they featured me on page 3 of their local paper wearing a red wig and a funny nose. So as a result of that PR, I raised £800 on Red Nose Day for Comic Relief. And on the day itself, the photographer came, and so I was featured in the newspaper yet again. So what happened is I called them the next week and I said, look, this is really great. Really appreciate what you've done for me. But can I do something for you now? How about if I write you a coaching column? I could write you a short column, 300-400 words every week, and be all around coaching and personal development, etc. And they loved the idea. So what happened was a month later, I had a regular column every week on the same page as the literacy editor. So it got me really good publicity and built up my profile. And 6 months later, I realized that I'd written so many really good articles. And that's what I did. I turned that into my first book. And that first book was Get a Life. And then eventually that became my second book. And since then, I've got 12 books on Kindle now. But it all started with me doing something for someone. And it all came back to me many fold. So that's where I started, really.
Okay, so you already have 12 books on Amazon.
On Kindle at the moment, yes. 12 Kindle books, out of which 4 of them are hard published books, as in paperback books.
Okay, so you have both paperbacks
and Kindle, yeah. But the main book, which has been an Amazon bestseller in its category, is Get the Life You Love. And that's been really my most amazing success, in the sense that I've sold thousands of copies now in both paperback and Kindle. And even though I published it 8 years back, it's still doing really well, and it's all very fresh.
Well, I was going to ask you, I remember I saw on Facebook's page, your Facebook's page, or somewhere else, I don't remember exactly, but I saw some photos where your book was in the bookstores next to very famous bestsellers. How did you do that?
Okay, well, partly it's luck as well. My surname is Devalia, begins with D. And in my field, some of the most famous people who write about personal development and spirituality are Wayne Dyer and Deepak Chopra. So my book just happened to be in between their books. And one of the things with the self-published authors, it's very hard to get into mainstream bookstores. But my book, I managed to get into Borders and Waterstones. And the question is, how did I do it?
Yes,
well,
sure.
by knocking on lots of doors. When I first published Get the Life You Love, which is my main book, I literally called all Waterstone stores in the country twice. So at that time, I think they had about 300 plus stores. I believe it's about 400 now. So I spent 2 weeks on and off on the phone, and I had an Excel spreadsheet where I wrote down all the numbers, all the different stores. Then I would keep a track about whom I'd spoken to, what the outcome of the call was. A lot of the times, I never got to speak to the right person, so I had to make numerous calls. And I told them the honest truth. I said, look, I'm a self-published author. I love your help to get my book out there. And would you consider stocking even 1 or 2 copies? And to be really fair, most of them were really helpful, very sympathetic. A lot of them didn't have much space, so they couldn't really stock the book. But quite a few of them did actually stock it. Even if they only ordered 1 or 2 copies, out of the few hundred stores, I reckon about 20, 30 stores ordered some copies, which meant that I had about 100, 200 sales in those 2 weeks, which may not sound much, but in the scheme of things, it was amazing, because as a result of that, I also rang up Borders head office, and I told them about Waterstones taking the book. And with Borders, what happened, those of you who don't know about Borders went bust about 5 years back, but they had about 60 stores around the UK, Borders and Books, etc. So the time I'm speaking about is before Borders went bust. So I called them up, and I called up all my local branches in London, Brent Cross, Watford, and then also, because I'm from the Midlands originally, in Coventry, I rang up the Coventry branch and the Leicester branch, and I told them that I'm a local author and I would love to do some book reading events for you. And what I was really surprised was that all of them said yes. They said very few authors approach us for book readings, and we'd love to have you. So I had events at all 4 stores, and about half a dozen people turned up at each event. The one in Brent Cross, only 2 people turned up, even though they'd laid out seating for 60 people. And they explained that because it was middle of June, nice sunny evening, people decided would have preferred to be outside. But as a result of that, each of those stores ordered 30 copies each, and they sold really well. And then the head office buyer and Borders picked up the sales. And the next thing I knew, I had an order for 300 plus books from Borders in one go.
Oh, amazing.
So amazingly, it was nationally listed in 60 stores with 3 or 4 copies in each store, or even more. Mm-hmm. And that's really built up the momentum. And then the other thing I did was also approach lots of newspapers and magazines about the book. I told them that, look, the book is listed in Waterstones, Borders. Could I write an article for you, or could you feature it? And so it got featured in half a dozen different magazines and newspapers over the years.
So can I say that the main strategy and the main thing that worked best was that you were really, really proactive?
I think that's the number one way, really. That's probably the number one reason for my success, being very proactive and not giving up. It takes a lot of focus and concentration and guts to keep calling all these stores when you might not get through, or you might not get the answer you wanted, or they might just refuse to talk to you. And obviously I made time for that because I had my coaching business to run as well. So I spent 3-4 hours every day on the phone. But the other thing was, I really believed in my book. I believe in the message of the main book, Get the Life You Love. I sort of really believe that the message in the book will transform a lot of people's lives, which will make a big difference in them. So that's what kept me going. If I had written a book that I didn't believe in, I don't think I would have had that focus or energy or drive to really get the book out there. Mm-hmm. Subsequently, over the years, I've had some amazing feedback from people, from readers who read the book, or people who come across my work and they appreciated how much it's helped them. And that's very gratifying when people come back to you with very positive feedback, which means that all along my belief in the book was justified. It wasn't just something that I was close to because I wrote the book myself.
No, it was really justified, because I personally read that book too, and I think I told you that it was really very warm, very practical.
Well, you bring up a good point, because one of the things that people ask me, what's different about my book? And I tell them, look, to be really honest with you, there are literally thousands of personal development books out there. You can go to any bookstore in London, say, and they have a small section, and you can pick up any one of like 200, 300, 400 books. And I said, look, there's really not much difference between my book and those, but for 2 reasons. Firstly, my book is not a reading book. It's an action book. There's space in there for people to write. I call it a playbook, not rather than a workbook. So people can write, they can take action immediately. because that's what you need. When you want to change your life, you read something and normally it inspires you for a day or two, but then you give up. But if you are forced to, or if you're given the space to write something down, write down your thoughts or write down some actions you're going to take, your life starts moving forward quite quickly. So that's one reason. That's one way it's different. And the other reason why I say it's different from any other or most books out there is that my personal life story is interweaved within the book. So I'm not just saying that, okay, go and do this ABC and try this or try that. I'm saying, look, this is what worked for me. This is where I messed up. And I suggest you try this as well. I really sort of exposed myself in the book. I made myself very vulnerable. People who read the book and sort of done all the exercises, they really know me inside out. I've had readers write into me saying that, wow, that's amazing. You sort of being so honest and authentic. And I feel that we really know you because you're really spoken from the heart. So I think that's a very important distinction that a writer should make. If you're going to write a non-fiction book, bring yourself into it, really sort of speak from the heart and make sure that your readers can really connect with you. If they connect with you, then they'll follow you and follow your other books and want more from you. It's like writing a blog. If you're really honest and open and vulnerable on your blog and authentic, the readers can connect with you.
Exactly. But wasn't it a bit scary in the beginning? Because being very open and opening up to people you don't really know may be a bit risky. How did you go around that? Did you have any doubts before deciding about this, or it came naturally?
Yeah. I think it partly came naturally, and partly I worked through it because initially in the first draft I talked a lot about my marriage, which my broken marriage. So I was talking a lot about what happened and almost like blaming myself. But in the end, it became quite a therapeutic journey to write the book. And then I worked with an editor to give the book an overview, and she said to me, "Look, this is really great stuff, but you've written so much about your marriage and relationships, etc. Let's get a bit of balance in there. Let's take some of those things out, and let's get more about you and more about the work you've done and more about the self-care that you do, etc." So it was a more balanced approach. So that's the other thing I would say. It's great talking about a lot about yourself, but get the balance. And it's always useful to work with an editor because when we write as authors, we're so close to the work, we can't see beyond what we've written. And it's really useful to have an expert to give you an external view, unbiased view. And my editor was brilliant. I mean, she was very straight talking, and she told me what I wanted to hear, what I needed to hear. And the book was a much better end result than otherwise.
Exactly, yeah. It's editing the text and having it professionally edited and working with professional editor is very crucial because especially, as you said, since there are so many books similar in that niche, and you have to differentiate somehow the quality of the text, at least, even if it's not differentiated, has to be perfect.
Yeah. The other thing the editor really helped me was to make sure that my language was very simple. I've had some feedback recently that the book is too simplistic, and I said, thank you, that's just what I wanted it to be. Because you don't want to make a book too complex. I mean, life is complex enough as it is. So if you're reading a book about getting the life you love, then why would you read a book that makes it harder than it should be? So the language is very simple, but it's not simplistic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, since it's not fiction and you're not targeting any specific creative writing style, nonfiction really should be simple because people are not reading it to evaluate, how complicated words you can use and, how stylishly correct you can put the sentence together. So it's not about that.
The other thing that really helped the book was my editor was also from a personal development field. So she was a writer around health and spirituality and in that kind of area. So it was really useful to have someone else who's also an expert to give me feedback because she was able to not necessarily bring her own experience into it, but she was able to give me an unbiased opinion of what I was saying. So one or two places in the book, she made me revisit what I've written because she didn't quite agree with it from her viewpoint. And I respected where she was coming from. So I did make some changes, which I might not have done otherwise.
Mm-hmm. I see.
Yeah. And the other thing is also nowadays, it's so easy to put a book together on Kindle. You get a Word document, you get a nice image done, or even I've seen some books with really not so nice images, and you upload it, and then you got your Kindle book. And there's a lot of hype about how easy it is to write a book and create a Kindle book and make it a bestseller, etc., etc. But that's really, to me, it's all hype because I see so many books on Kindle which are really badly produced. And even if the content would be good, if they haven't used an editor or if they haven't had a professional image done, it really shows through. So I would caution anyone who thinks that it's really easy to write a book and put it together. It is, but you might not make many sales, because ultimately I'm assuming that people who put a Kindle book together want to generate sales and further business from the book. But if it's not that great quality, it will not be a good reflection on the service you're offering in the first place.
Yeah, well, I will rephrase a bit and tell that, yes, it is easy to put a book together on Kindle, but it is not easy to put a good book on Kindle together. So we should really make this differentiation. Because
and even I would add something more to that. It's even harder to make it a successful Kindle book. You might have a good Kindle book. Mm-hmm. You might have put it together well, but you still have to do a lot of work yourself to market it and to get people's attention and to build up a community around it.
Absolutely. So you said you had 12 books on Kindle. How are they doing now?
They're doing really well. I mean, at the moment, I'm just revisiting my strategy and how to get more of it out there. But They Get the Life You Love, my main book, is selling about 100 a month.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's really nice passive income.
Yes, it's good passive income, and also it's exposure building, and it leads to coaching clients. People who get the book contact me, and they also become blog readers.
Mm-hmm. Oh, very good. So you have everything linked together, which is perfect.
Yes, yeah.
Since you had the blog before the books, I presume that part of your readers were the ones who were reading your blog, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, and the others, the new readers, where did you get those? How did you engage with these readers? What was the model of acquiring new readership?
Okay, so there's two things there. So I have a blog, and on the blog I promote the book. So readers who come to the blog, new readers come to the blog, get exposed to the book. And when they sign up to my newsletter, I send them a short version of the main book, Get the Life You Love. So anyone who signs up to my blog gets the first 5 chapters as a PDF. So they get that for free. And there they can go on and get the full book if they wish. So I'm getting quite a few sales from that, actually. And then because of the nature of my book, which is a playbook where you can write within the book if you want to. People who buy the Kindle book then go off and buy the paper version of the book.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So if they want to keep it as their journal or their diary or their Bible, if you like, for personal development, then they get the paperback copy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay. Very, very interesting. Because in your case, I presume that you don't have this huge disbalance of selling much, much more ebooks than the paperback in that case.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm selling more Kindle books than paperback books.
Yeah, of course, but not as such a big because usually the balance, the imbalance is quite big, like 10 to 1 or something like that.
And interestingly, I also sell many more paperback books at the beginning of the year.
At the beginning of the year. So
beginning of the year, January, February, March is most of my sales. So my strategies I'm looking into now is how to keep that going for the rest of the year.
Okay, so you have identified the reasons why?
It's mainly the new year. People want to look at the new year resolutions, and my book is the kind of book that people look at when they're reviewing their goals for the year. But as I say, you can start setting new year resolutions or resolutions any time of the year. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's a psychological thing. I think it's also about sports gyms as well. Many people are getting these subscriptions for a few months and then they give up again. So they have this huge spike of sales of subscriptions. So
post-Christmas, everyone starts thinking about their life and what they're going to do in the upcoming year. And then they go out and join gyms and they buy all these books. And then come March, they'll stop going to the gym.
Yeah.
They stop buying these books. They stop reading the books, which is why really it's an ongoing thing. It's people who want to change their lives.
And it's pity because they already spent some time and energy by starting. So it's a pity they give up because in the very beginning you don't really get results immediately. And if you don't push a bit more, then you might just be disappointed and it's bad.
Yeah, and I think that applies to writers as well. When you first produce a book, you do well. And if you self-publish, I'm assuming that a lot of the family, the friends, the colleagues would buy the book initially to support you. And then they might get a few organic sales. And usually, from my experience, a lot of self-published authors I've spoken to, they don't sell many more than, say, a couple of hundred paperback copies to start with, and that's it. And then sales become very infrequent.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things we spoke about earlier on is about being persistent. You have to keep marketing it. You have to believe in your book, and you have to find all sorts of creative ways of continuing to market it, bring it in front of readers or people who could become readers. There's so many different things you could be doing. Speaking engagements, social media promotions. One of the things I do, for example, which is kind of quirky as well, on the front cover of Get the Life You Love, there's a sunflower.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime I see a sunflower out there, I'll take a picture of the sunflowers with my book and put it on social media. So that book is constantly in people's faces without bothering them. It's kind of a quirky way, and it's kind of humorous as well.
Yeah, it's not annoying at all. It's not really pushy, because I've come across those photos a lot as well, since we're friends in social media too, and I can say that it's not really pushy at all. It doesn't have any implication of the message like buy my book, which is quite annoying when they wave it in your face. So it's a very nice and creative way you have found there.
And the book, the sunflowers reflects the message of the book as well. What I'm saying is that it's possible for all of us to be happy and successful and have meaningful lives, and we don't have to get hung up on things that don't work for us. We remain positive and keep doing what we need to do, and we can all have amazing lives. And the message of the sunflower is something that's happy, it's blooming, it's fresh. And that brings me to an interesting point about the book, actually, because when I had the book done 8 years back, I used an editor, so there's a cost involved in the editor. I had a professional typesetter set the book. And something that I spent a lot of time and money on was the professional cover.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, I see a lot of Kindle books which have been done with a cover produced on, say, Fiverr.com.
Yeah.
I spent almost £500 with a cover designer. And we looked around at images. I really wanted it to be something bright and colorful and happy. And eventually I realized sunflower was just perfect for me. And then we worked on a number of images. And then when I got the version that the book has, the penny just dropped. You just know when something is right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm so happy with the final cover. It's like one of the best things I've done, actually. That cover is universal and people love the cover. And when I put it in bookstores, just the cover itself makes people want to grab it. I did a lot of research into this as well. Apparently it's been proven that the book colors that get the most attention in a bookstore is yellow and orange.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that.
It's proven that books which are orange or yellow or both are picked up more than any other color combination or any other color.
Interesting tip.
So, which is why my book's orange and yellow.
Okay, I see. So when
I say my book, is the main book, Get the Life You Love.
Okay, so you knew that before.
I knew that before, and I deliberately asked the designer it had to be those colors. Yeah, I mean, he came up with some really daft designs to start with, and I kept insisting, no, this is not what I want. Keep going. And eventually, we got the sunflower. In fact, a friend of mine, she sent me a leaflet with her, which had a sunflower on it.
Uh-huh.
So we used that image or something similar.
Mm-hmm. I see.
That just seems so right. So really, again, a lot of synchronicities happened with producing my main book. People gave me the right image. The cover designer was recommended to me. The typesetting company was recommended to me. And what I did was the printers I was recommended to, because in those days, print on demand wasn't quite set up yet.
Mm-hmm.
So I had 4,500 copies printed by a printer up in East Anglia, Norwich, which is sort of east of England.
Uh-huh.
And we met up in central London for some costings. So first I said, I'll have 1,000 copies. And they said, look, the difference between 1,000 and 2,000 is so little. Maybe you want to go for 2,000. And because, again, it comes back to my belief in the book, I knew that if I had 2,000 copies done, I can sell them. And funnily enough, they came back to me and they said, the way they work, printers, is they have a huge paper drum.
Mm-hmm.
They said if I was to double my amount from 2,000 to 4,000, it'd be something like only extra £100 or something. So I thought, okay, it doesn't make much sense not to have those extra 2,000 copies. So in the end, as it worked out, I had 4,500 copies done. And the cost between 2,000 and 4,500 was so little, it's about £300. It made total sense to do it. What I hadn't realized was how much volume that 4,500 copies would take.
That's what I was going to ask you. How did you store it?
It almost weighed a ton in paper, 3/4 ton actually. And books were packed in boxes of 60. and I had about 70, 80 boxes delivered to me, and it took up a lot of space. But the good thing is, 8 years later, I'm down to my last 3 boxes. So I sold or given away the almost 4,000 copies plus. And since I've been doing print on demand for the last 5 years, those 3 boxes would have gone a long time ago. But the book is now being sent out on print on demand for any Amazon orders.
So is it on CreateSpace?
No, I'm not using CreateSpace. I'm using Lightning Source. So Lightning Source is the world's largest printer. And so basically the way it works that rather than Amazon supplying a paperback copy order through CreateSpace, they send the order request to Lightning Source, who then print off 1 copy that goes to Amazon, and Amazon then send it out to the customer.
Okay.
The reason why I've done that is it's financially is better for me. And secondly, it was set up even before CreateSpace was created.
Okay, I see.
I mean, there's pros and cons. Personally, I just prefer Lightning Source, and the system's been working well for me for the last 5 years, so there's no reason for me to change it.
I see. Yeah. Well, let's go back to, like, not just that book, but in general, all your books. And I would like to know who or what inspires you to write your books.
Okay, yeah. I think I have to be honest. One of the thrills of writing books is actually see it in bookstores and to have some sales. So when I log into my Kindle dashboard and I see I sold 4 or 5 copies this morning or in the last 24 hours, that's the real kick, and that inspires me to do more. I mean, at the moment, as I said, I'm selling about 100 a month, which in my reckoning is okay, but big part of me says I could be doing lots more. So that inspires me. I want to do lots more. And the underlying thing is actually not even about selling the books. It's about making a difference to as many people as I can in as short a time as I can. So if Get the Life You Love, which is the book that I talk about mainly, if I can sell thousands of that copy of that book every month, then I know that thousands of people out there will be focusing on getting the life they love. And that's what really drives me, is to get that book out there to a much wider audience. Then I know that people are improving their lives, and that's what my reason for being is. That makes sense.
Okay, I see.
So I think that also brings me to an important point, which readers or listeners should know about, is to believe in your book and know that it's going to make a big difference out there. Generally, I speak about mainly nonfiction books, but fiction books as well. If you write a fiction book, know that people out there will be impacted by it. And if you can believe in your book and set out with a mission to impact people, I think your book will be a much better product, and it will likely to do more and better for you.
I see. Did you ever consider or ever want it to be traditionally published or not?
I didn't actually. When I was writing Get the Life You Love, I really wanted to get it out there quickly, as soon as possible. So I know if I had waited for a traditional publisher, it might have taken another year, and I wouldn't have any rights to it now. So right now, I can change the cover as I wish. I can change the content as I wish. I can upload and play around with the Kindle version as I wish. And the other thing was also, when I wrote the first book, my very first ever book was Get a Life. And this is the newspaper column articles, which I mentioned earlier on. So it was mid-October that year, 6 months into my writing column, that I thought, wow, there's enough material to turn it into a book. So I met up an editor friend of mine. I said, look, I'd really like to get a book out by Christmas this year, which was only, 8 weeks away. Do you think it's possible? And she said, well, if you don't do anything for the next 4 weeks and give me the draft copy, we can probably make it work. So anyway, that was a conversation mid-October. And November the 30th that year, I had a hard copy of my first book in my hands. So those 6 weeks was probably the hardest I ever worked in my life. And that's really, to answer your question, why I went self-publish. I couldn't wait for a traditional publisher. I wanted to get a book out that year, by Christmas that year. So my first book was actually called Get a Life, and I had 2,000 copies printed. And within, I would say, about 14 months, I sold them all. And that's to Get a Life. Then I rewrote into Get the Life You Love. But the whole focus was to get it out there quickly. And if I had waited for a traditional publisher, I might not have got it out that soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And
there's lots of other reasons as well. I wanted it to be my work, my copyright, my sort of creation rather than someone else's. But that's not to say there's no space for traditional publishers. Maybe for my next book or a future book, I'll go with a traditional publisher.
Okay.
But and I think it should be relatively easier now for me to get one because of my track record. I have sold over 10,000 copies of books now, so that puts me
absolutely.
That's put me quite high up there amongst self-published authors, I guess.
Absolutely, and you also already have established audience, which means that you already have a minimal market which can be ensured by your publishing your next book.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and so what are your plans for the future? What's coming next?
As I said, I reckon, amongst all my different books, I sold 10,000 copies plus. I really like to get that figure up to a million copies. So everything I do, if I was to do nothing else for the next 2 years and just focus on book marketing, I reckon I could get a million sales across all the different books and all the different channels I'm working on. And maybe that's what I should do. Maybe I should say I'll drop everything else. 1st of July today, 1st of July 2016, maybe I'll be a million selling author.
So are we making this official?
I love challenges, yes. So let's make it official.
Okay, cool. I'll be checking later on to see what happened. Okay.
No, seriously, I think there's so much potential in my market, in the area I write in, and there's lots of room for collaboration with other authors. And the way the market is going, social media as well, I've got a fairly good name already established, and there's no reason why I can't build on that quite dramatically and take my game up to the next level.
Absolutely. And now looking back, what would you do differently? Is there anything you, well, I wouldn't say regret because it's not the exact word, but would you do something differently if you knew what you know now?
Yeah, a couple of things. I'll write many more books than I have, especially now that we can create Kindle books relatively easily. Even now, that's one of my strategies, to create many more Kindle books. As I said, I've got 12 at the moment. Mm-hmm. And I would love to create more. And when I say create more, it has to be obviously quality and relevant and nicely produced. So if I could create, say, one book a month, that's what I'd love to do. And I wish I'd done that, say, over the last 3-4 years. If I could start again, I would do that. I would say focus on writing more books, creating more books. Yeah, I'll probably do more collaboration work.
Okay.
Create books with other authors. And there's something what I'd like to do in the future, maybe not immediately, is to write a fiction book as well.
Fiction as well. Oh, yes, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I can be much more creative, even more creative, and look at different niches and areas I could write in. Yeah.
Okay. And you mean novellas?
Yes, novellas. Yeah.
Novellas. Okay. And okay, more general question for you. What's your ultimate dream in life in general?
I was thinking about this. Everyone really wants to be. This is what I believe, actually. Everyone ultimately just wants to be happy and joyous. And then we all go through life thinking we want something else. And then when we get those things, we're still not there. So we want to be looking for more things. So I think ultimately I just want to be happy and joyous. But I also want to make a big impact on the world and create a legacy. I said to someone jokingly the other day, which was actually wasn't that jokingly. I said I'd love to be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Not necessarily because I want to be winning it, but just by being nominated for it means that I made an impact in the world, and I made a huge contribution towards having peace in the world.
I see.
And one of the ways I'll do that is through my writing.
I see. Yeah. And maybe the last question here for our listeners: what would be your advice, your biggest tips for newbie writers? What would you advise them?
Okay, get started. I cannot tell you how many people I met, even in the last few months alone, who say they want to write a book, but then I say, well, how's it going? And they said they haven't started yet. So just get started. You know, it's a cop-out when you say you haven't started yet, and they say they got writer's block, they haven't got the time. There's no such thing as writer's block. You plant yourself in front of the laptop, switch off your Wi-Fi, switch off your internet, and start writing. And then see where you are half an hour later, an hour later. And then build up. And the biggest thing is believe in yourself. Believe in your book that you write. Believe that you have a message. Everyone has a unique message, really. I really do believe that, because I meet amazing people all the time, and I say to them, look, you got so much to offer. You got such a great story. Have you thought about writing a book? And then they say, well, I haven't. Or they say, I have, but I haven't got around to it. And it's really funny. Most people have a book in them. Most people want to write a book. But I'm guessing less than 1% of people ever get around to writing a book. And nowadays, it's so easy to get a book published through Kindle or even print on demand that anyone who's got a reasonable writing style can get a book out there. I mean, again, depends what they want. If they want to sell thousands, then they'll have to do it professionally. They just want to have a book in their name. That can be done quite easily as well. But you have to start. You have to get it written down. And I would say don't worry about your grammar or your style initially. An editor can work with that, or you can go back and change it. But let's just brain dump it. Whatever's in your head, just get it down there. Don't worry about structure initially. Or even have a very simple structure, 10 chapters, maybe 10 paragraphs, something like that. Keep it simple and get it done. And then you can always make it better afterwards.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for the great advice. I'm also a big advocate of taking action, and I really don't like the future tense when people talk in future tense, but then at the end it stays in the future all the time, no matter when you see them. So really good advice. I will include your blog, most probably will be the hub where people could follow you, or the ones who would like to get in touch with you for possible coaching or any questions or anything. Where should they go? Your blog?
Yeah, they can go to my blog, yes. So it's arvinddevalia.com/blog. There's also a contact form, so they can contact me directly to the blog. And they can also check out the books on Amazon. If they put my name on Amazon, they can see them. And the one I've been talking about a lot during this interview is the Get the Life You Love, which is actually an Amazon best-selling book in its category.
Great.
So there's an Amazon bestseller label on it, logo on it. And I think you summarized it really well. The key thing really to take away for any listeners is take action. Start writing, start marketing, start spreading your message, start sharing yourself, and you too can be someone with huge sales, whether you're self-published or traditional publisher. There's no rocket science here, really. There isn't. Action. Focus, action, determination, persistence, all those things. I mean, those are words which I'm just throwing out, but those are words which have really helped me, and there's no reason why anyone else should also follow the same path as me and succeed.
Agree. Yes. Well, thank you very much for spending this time with us. Thank you for your interesting talk. I hope our listeners got very useful information, and they will be motivated enough based on your example to go ahead and really finally start writing their book and making the same success you had.
Well, thanks for having me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Well, that was it for today. I hope that you learned at least something new from this interview and it was valuable to you. And the last thing I would like to say is that if you like the Right to Be Read podcast and would like to help me out with growing it, please take a minute and leave a review on iTunes. I will truly appreciate that. So meet you in the next episode and have a nice day.